Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, we're focusing on these big USDA reports with Darren Fry and Matt Bennett. And let's start off with corn acres coming in at 91.5 million acres, guys, up almost 1.5 million acres from the March report. First of all, Darren, where did those acres come from?
That's a great question. I guess as we were talking before we got on here, Matt and you and I, that maybe just people were so discouraged with the base price being low, and at the end of March, they just weren't real optimistic, and so maybe the survey was just low from an extraordinary standpoint. And I don't think farmers, as the season went on and it got rainier and it had more trouble getting their crop in those certain areas, like up towards the Northwest, they planted more, or because they thought there was more profitability, they planted more, or they had an easier time. Corn was going in so well, so they kept going. I don't think it was any of that. I think this is just a reaction to maybe a low ball number in March.
Yeah, and I know, Matt, you agree with that. You thought the number was too low to start with. I guess the next question is, we did have flooded acres now here that came after the surveys were taken in the Northwestern Corn Belt. Does that mean this number will go down? And if it does, when would it even show up?
I mean, it's highly unlikely you'll see the planted acreage number go down. I suppose by the end of the year, you're going to see it reflected. Mostly, you're probably going to see it reflected in would be in harvested acres and or yield. And so the report for me and for our team wasn't a shock on acreage. Actually, I believe we were the highest estimate at 91.3. We felt all along like those March numbers were artificially low. I mean, we just felt like the grower had seen the lowest prices they'd seen in about 3 years. And so, I think that sentiment was so low that most producers weren't overly optimistic about exactly what they were going to do as far as planning was concerned, especially with really high input costs still. But I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, because we also predicted that bean acres would be higher, and we missed that one just a little bit.
Yeah, Matt, how much does this add then to production, these extra acres of corn?
Yeah, and so whenever you start talking about, for instance, the 91.5, if you go ahead with, a typical harvested percentage of, let's say around 91%, if you get a 181, you're starting to talk about a 2.5 billion bushel carry again with pretty strong demand. USDA's forecasted fairly strong demand. That's what we're using in our balance sheet. If you go to like a 178 type range, you're still looking at a 2.3. So you certainly are going to have plenty of corn on hand planting this type of acreage without some sort of major weather event. Clearly we're a couple weeks away from, I think, people feeling a little bit better. If you get through pollination with no major issues in the bulk of the Corn Belt, I think that you're going to start talking about some awfully big carryout numbers.
Soybean number came in on acreage 86.1 million acres, down a little over 400,000 from March. Darren, did those go straight, or did those come straight from corn, or go straight to corn? Or do you think, this pulls the balance sheet down that much now?
Well, I think corn probably got some of those acres. That's probably what makes the most sense. I know cotton acres were up a whole bunch too. So maybe we had a few less beans planted down in the Mid-South Delta region because we know cotton was up over 1 million acres. So that could have been part of it. I mean, we have a pretty decent carry out on the balance sheet now, and moving into new crop, I don't see us being real tight there, even with this reduction in acres. Got to remember that China so far hasn't booked really anything for new crop, and maybe they're going to. Maybe it's going to be just in time inventory, but they don't have any forward bookings on. So I still think that balance sheet is going to be where the problems are. I'm more bullish corn just because demand has been better. But obviously, like Matt said, 2.3, 2.5 isn't going to be a bullish scenario unless we reduce this crop significantly.
Absolutely. Well, we got some bearish numbers in the quarterly stocks report as well. We'll talk about that after the break.